Imagine waking up one morning and discovering someone claimed they legally owned your house. Now imagine they claimed your town, your ranch, your railroad, your mine, your entire territory. In the 1880s, one man walked into court carrying what appeared to be a centuries-old Spanish land grant. He insisted that nearly all of what is now Arizona legally belonged to him. For years, governments, investors, lawyers, and businessmen took the claim seriously. Millions of dollars hung on what may have been one of the boldest frauds in American history. The American Southwest was built on uncertainty. Long before the United States arrived, Spain controlled vast stretches of the region. Later came Mexico. Then, after the Mexican-American War, much of that land became part of the United States. But political borders changed much faster than property records. Old Spanish land grants, Mexican deeds, handwritten surveys, faded maps. Many had been lost, destroyed, or never accurately recorded in the first place. Nobody could always agree on who owned what, and that uncertainty created enormous opportunity. Across the West, speculators searched dusty archives looking for forgotten land grants. Some claims were genuine, others stretched the truth, and a few were nothing more than elaborate fabrications. Into this world stepped James Addison Reavis. He wasn't a wealthy rancher. He wasn't a famous politician. He wasn't even a powerful businessman. He was something far more dangerous, a patient con artist. Reavis understood one simple truth. The greatest frauds don't begin with money. They begin with paperwork. He spent years studying Spanish handwriting, colonial legal language, official seals, church records, and government archives. Investigators would later conclude that he inserted forged pages into legitimate documents while creating an elaborate paper trail that stretched back more than a century. At the center of his scheme was an enormous Spanish land grant, supposedly issued during the 18th century. If it were authentic, it would cover an astonishing amount of land across present-day Arizona and parts of New Mexico. The documents looked convincing. The signatures appeared genuine. The dates lined up with real historical events. Even experienced officials struggled to spot the deception. Reavis wasn't simply selling fake land. He was attempting to rewrite history itself. But forged documents alone weren't enough. He needed a legitimate heir. So he created one. Reavis identified a young woman named Sophia, claiming she was the direct descendant of the noble family that supposedly owned the grant. Then he married her. Overnight, he transformed himself into the husband of the rightful heir to one of the largest private land claims in American history. It was a brilliant strategy. If a railroad crossed the territory, it should pay the heirs. If a mining company dug for copper, it should pay the heirs. If a rancher grazed cattle, pay the heirs. If an entire town had been built inside the grant, pay the heirs. Many people did exactly that. Some businesses quietly settled, rather than spend years fighting expensive court battles. Others feared they could lose everything if the claim turned out to be legitimate. Reavis carefully crafted his image. He dressed like a gentleman. He spoke with confidence. He understood legal procedure and surrounded himself with an air of respectability. He didn't look like an outlaw. He looked like someone you would trust. And that made him even more dangerous. Eventually, however, the claim reached the federal government. This time, investigators weren't willing to accept appearances. They examined the ink, the handwriting, the paper, the official seals. Historians compared the supposed Spanish records against authentic colonial archives. Slowly, small inconsistencies began to emerge. A title used before it officially existed. A signature that didn't match genuine records. Documents written in styles from different periods. One mistake could be dismissed, but dozens couldn't. Piece by piece, the entire story began to collapse. Years of painstaking forgery couldn't survive careful investigation. The evidence pointed toward one extraordinary conclusion. The massive Spanish land grant had never existed. In 1895, Reavis's empire finally came crashing down. Federal investigators dismantled his claims piece by piece. The courts rejected the land grant. The fabricated family history unraveled, and the forged documents became evidence against him. Instead of becoming one of the richest men in America, James Reavis was convicted of fraud and sentenced to prison. His dream of owning Arizona ended behind bars. The territory remained exactly where it had always been. But the case left behind a remarkable lesson. Sometimes the most powerful weapon in the Old West wasn't a revolver. It was a forged signature. The Wild West is remembered for gunfights, bank robberies, train holdups, but one of its most audacious crimes involved no bullets at all, just ink, paper, patience, and a man bold enough to believe he could steal an empire without ever firing a single shot. Because on the American frontier, the deadliest con wasn't always committed at gunpoint. Sometimes, it was committed at a desk,